Hi, folks. I'm going to do a video today on the new moon eclipse in Capricorn on January 6th. And this is a partial solar eclipse, so it's not necessarily as powerful as a full eclipse might be. And of course, you're going to want to just do some research to see if the region you live in, that is gonna, if you're gonna witness the eclipse, if you could actually see it from where you are, because it will be more powerful for those people who can see it, but nonetheless it'll still be significant for those of us who um, can't fully see it, if that makes sense, because it's still with the node. So basically, it's an eclipse because it's the sun and moon are conjoining really close to one of the nodes, in this case, the south node. So, as always, I'm going to read this chart from the sign of the new moon, which is Capricorn, and I'm going to read the houses from that sign. And I'm going to see, what I can do, what I can figure out, what I can get into. Hopefully, it'll be helpful for those of you watching and whatnot. But yeah, I don't know. We'll see. So I don't know. Everybody makes a pretty big deal about eclipses, and ancient cultures and religions have made a big deal about eclipses for a really long time. I think that at the end of the day, while they are significant in a sense, because there's a more powerful, more subtle energies arising, so to speak. I think it's kind of overrated what the astrological community at large tends to do with eclipses. They tend to make huge deals out of them and talk about all this spiritual kind of new agey mumbo jumbo of, oh, this is an opportunity to become enlightened and to, I don't even know. They just kind of talk about stuff that just doesn't really, it's just kind of a bunch of sophistry. So I'm going to do my best not to do that. The truth is every moment in time is the moment to embrace destiny, to embrace the divinity within ourselves. And whether there's an eclipse or not, it's just another moment. It's just a unique moment or not. So I don't think we need to make too big of a deal out of it. But I will say that with any sort of eclipse or lunation in general, that a lot of religions would do fasting around them, a bit of fasting, maybe the day before, the day of, and the day after, kind of like a 3-day period of some fasting. And so the simplest way to deal with any eclipse is to do some fasting. And physical fasting, meaning with food, is merely a gateway to more, what you could say, like mental, emotional, spiritual kinds of realms or fasts. Because when we have to fast physically in terms of the food we eat, we also have to focalize our mind and our emotions and our will, so to speak. So that's why physical fasting can indeed be spiritually cleansing as well, because it's really just sort of a gateway to those more subtle dimensions of reality, just starting with the physical instead of the spiritual. And so the thing is, you can do a fast in multiple different ways. You can fast in terms of the physical, right, where you do something simple, like you could not eat between sunrise and sunset, right? That's a simple fast to do. You could do another fast where you just eat a very simple food like khichdi, and you only eat khichdi, which is a very cleansing food from India. Or you could only eat fruits or something like that. So very simple stuff. And the idea behind that is you're not only cleansing your body, but you're also, by cleansing your body, you have to focalize your will and so on. But you could also fast mentally and emotionally, right? You could abstain from certain types of thoughts and behaviors that evoke certain states of being that are maybe unbecoming or unwholesome. And that's kind of what Lent is, where you're supposed to give up something for Lent. Now, you're supposed to, when in Lent, which is a Christian tradition, you're supposed to give up something Like if you give up smoking for Lent, you're not supposed to start smoking after you've given it up, right? So if you want to fast, right? And I don't know. I probably won't fast. I'm pretty lazy about this stuff. But the point is that if you're having some troubles and you want to do something with regard to this eclipse, maybe you've read some other astrologers' stuff on the eclipse, or if you watch some other videos on the eclipse, and they've talked about a whole bunch of spiritual mumbo jumbo that is confusing or whatever. The simplest thing to do is just a light fast, because no matter how you do it, it can help all other aspects of your life, right? So you might abstain from arguing. You might abstain from being on Facebook or social media. You might fast by not engaging with certain people in your life that are typically very toxic for, again, 2 to 3 days surrounding the eclipse. Spiritually speaking, if we go to the more subtle levels, then the way you would fast is by basically being very vigilant and focusing upon the divine at each and every moment, or chanting a mantra intensely throughout the day, and so on. Or you might fast by doing acts of goodwill, and so on. You're fasting from selfishness by doing selfless acts for other people or animals or whatever. So there's a lot of ways to fast. Okay, don't go to food immediately. But the food way is kind of the easiest way, in a sense, for a lot of us, at least. So that's the first thing. So with that out of the way, I'm just going to interpret the chart. We have Sun, Moon, and Saturn together with, forming a pretty close bond within 4 degrees. Saturn's at 11, Capricorn, the Sun and Moon are at 15. So within 4 degrees, right? And the eclipse, which is a solar eclipse, meaning the sun is getting blocked out by the moon, is also with Ketu. And so why did I talk about all this stuff with fasting with the eclipse? Well, because basically the eclipses invert the natural order of things. In other words, in this scenario, the people who will be able to see the eclipse will actually be able to see the moon. Normally at a new moon, you cannot see the moon, right? The moon is totally dark. But they'll be able to see the moon for a brief period of time. And so it's an inversion of the natural order. And this is why in most religions, the energy, they felt like at the eclipses, the energies became very intensified. And that is true. And in, Tibetan Buddhism, for example, they would say the results of your good and bad actions during an eclipse are going to be multiplied, many thousands of times, and so on and so forth. So, it's always an opportunity for being more aware, being more vigilant, and possibly overcoming some deep-seated emotional and mental obstacles, potentially at least. So that's kind of, and they're right. The energies are definitely intensified, no doubt, during any lunation, right, full or new moon, but especially during eclipses because of the nature of the inversion of the natural order of things. And when we have a solar eclipse where the moon is eclipsing the sun, since the moon refers naturally to the past, the sun more naturally to the present, what happens is that the past is sort of eclipsing the present. And so basically what happens during one of these eclipses is that the mind is not so much purified as the contents of the mind are sort of drudged up, meaning that any sort of past experiences might come to the forefront and dominate one's mood or state of mind or focus and so on. And with Ketu, there's kind of potentially a resistance or rejection of that. Ketu and Saturn, I would say. And again, Ketu is the south node right here. So there's kind of this theme of rejecting deep-seated traumas of the past, or deep-seated guilt or things like that. Capricorn, Saturn, this is the 10th sign of the zodiac. So this can very much have to do with responsibilities, and henceforth tends to be kind of a guilt response thing too. So basically this could be a situation where, collectively speaking, ghosts of the past surrounding work and responsibility and efforts and lethargic kind of states of being are sort of coming to the forefront. It could easily be a hopeless kind of mentality. Now, I don't really think it's going to be that hopeless for most people, but there's a real there's really a very, very much a kind of an obscuring of the solar aspect of things. The moon and Saturn together refer to the ego structure, which is basically the aspect of the psyche that allows us to define ourselves, right? Define ourselves, which is Saturnic, and to adapt ourselves or adapt that definition to changing situations and circumstances, which is the moon. So moon and Saturn are kind of obstructing the sun, which is pure being, pure essence, spirit, and so on. And so in that sense, that's why I think about like this being a possible situation of sort of like victimhood and hopelessness coming to the forefront. If you are a person who has had I'm losing the words here. Sorry. If you are a person who has had a tendency, there we go, tendency to be really down on yourself, feel really oppressed, and kind of feel victimize yourself in your circumstances, then this is a period of time in which that is maybe going to come to the forefront. But with K2 there, it may be something that you resist or turn away from, and that you don't want to recognize really consciously. The nodes always blind us to things. And so I think that it's important to always look at what the nodes are referring to and think, how am I potentially not seeing this? How am I hiding from this? How am I denying this? Right? And again, Saturn deals with denial. So that's kind of the basic essence of the eclipse, and I could stop the video here and that might be it, but I'm going to go ahead and interpret a couple more things and get a little more out of this chart. So in terms of the elements, we're missing the air element, just like we were during the last lunation, if I remember correctly. So that speaks to a potential lack of objectivity, a potential lack of socialization, kind of just being overly subjective, not being able to accept things as they are. Air correlates to the heart chakra, the heart center. And what does that mean? That means that the heart of our being, the ability to love and accept things, deals with, is related to being able to breathe and being able to just take things as they are, not be so directly involved in them, not trying to change things. Air just is, right? We don't see air. We feel air in a variety of different ways on our skin and so on, especially when there's wind. But air is essentially aloof and impersonal, right? We all breathe the same air. Whether we're criminals and murderers and rapists, or we're saints and heroes and, leaders or whatever. It doesn't matter. We all breathe the same air. So kind of a lack of objectivity, once again, as there was in the last lunation. And so that's to me, a major factor. There's going to be potential to think that, we can do anything we want, in a sense, with, I think, Jupiter in the 12th house and ruling that 12th house. Jupiter deals primarily with power. And Jupiter is arguably feral, meaning that no planets make a close degree-based aspect, right? Mars is kind of wide. And a feral Jupiter can easily be a situation in which people think that, again, they can just do whatever they want. They can just have free reign over whatever they want. And, it's kind of like a manifest destiny. I'll just take this. I'll just do whatever. I'll just expand, as much as I want. Nothing's going to happen. And I'm saying this too because Jupiter's in the 12th house, which is, which very much oftentimes deals with behavioral patterns and things that can easily get in our way because they're so unconscious. They have a life of their own. They're so unacknowledged and so on. So, the question becomes, where are you perhaps stretching yourself too thin? And why are you doing that? Is it a matter of not really having faith and so on? And again, getting too egotistical with Saturn and Moon, right? Just too egotistical. So, the sun, the ruler, the king, is not able to govern properly. And instead, he's got this fat, rich noble who was supposed to be his advisor, right? Just kind of running amok. Jupiter's much stronger than the sun here, by sign at least, right? And the sun and all these planets are in the fall of Jupiter, the sign where Jupiter falls, right? So on a certain level, there's a theme of not paying attention to expenditures, to losses, to stretching oneself too thin. More positively, it could also be a very charitable thing, spending a lot of money on, charitable and good works and stuff like that. That would be a good way to at least channel or utilize this signature, especially if it was in a birth chart. But I don't know if that's really what this is pointing to. Again, I get this more like gluttonous vibe from this Jupiter situation here myself. So yeah, we have no air, and we mainly have, I wrote it down, we mainly have Earth. We have 4 planets in Earth. We have a stellium in Capricorn, plus Pluto is there. Pluto is pretty close actually to all this, right? Pluto is at 20, so it's only 5 degrees from the eclipse, right? So Pluto is definitely in there, making its presence felt. And Pluto can easily manifest as control, but I think here it adds to the friction. There's kind of a destruction of pre-established and long-standing traditions and forms and stuff like that, but there's a strong resistance to it. So there's a theme of really people struggling with institutions and traditions and whatnot. I think this could set the stage for a lot of political upheaval and a lot of political unrest, and people being really negatively affected by the government, which is already happening due to things like this government shutdown and whatnot. Stuff like this is already happening. But we can see that even before this eclipse is taking place, that the institutions of the government are being more and more upset, more and more shaken loose. There's no governing, which would be the sun, right? There's just this Saturn moon complex happening. President versus Congress. Let's build the wall, that kind of bullshit and whatnot. At least in this country, the US. I don't know what it's like in other countries, because to be honest, I spend most of my time reading about esoteric stuff and not all that much time thinking about politics. So, especially in other countries, I'll have to admit. I think it's noteworthy that Saturn is the second lord. That has to do with finances and self-esteem and security. So again, like holding on to money and stuff can be a really negative thing in this chart. Really negative. Definitely obstructing and causing problems with just being who we are and doing what we love and so on. If we look at the 12th parts, the sun and moon fall in Cancer in the 7th. Thereby highlighting the 7th house. We also have the prenatal lunation in the 7th, opposed almost exactly by Mercury. So that's kind of interesting. Mercury is sort of linking us to the past. And so what does that mean? Well, Mercury rules the 6th, right? Which could be some kind of affliction or accident that happened in the past. And Mercury rules also the 9th house, which could be some kind of journey or something like that, some kind of expansion, some kind of opportunity that's kind of coming from the past. Perhaps if you've done anything, if you've done anything 9th house wise, if you've done anything like applied to a school or even applied for a grant or, just tried to make good on a promise or something, I think that things could sort of start happening during this lunation period for you. And but sun and moon in the 7th is quite interesting. We actually do have a really interesting thing that happens with Venus and Mars, because Venus is the Atmakaraka, the soul planet, and Mars is the Datakaraka, the planet signifying others or the spouse. And there's something that happens that I observed. Oh, yes. And that is that basically the sun and moon are in the bounds of Venus. But then when they shift into 12th part, they're in the bounds of Mars. So again, there's this sort of hidden Venus Mars thing. And of course, the seventh house is very Venusian. So this is definitely about sexuality and, emotionality and whatnot. Once again, yet again, right? I feel like it always comes back to this relationship stuff personally. And so, okay, so what, yeah, but what does that do, right? Well, Venus is in the 11th house here. Venus is in the 11th house. So, on some level, there may be high hopes and ideals for a relationship of some kind, okay? But Venus is in the bounds of Saturn and is about to move into the 12th house. It'll probably move into that 12th house fairly soon. And so the problem with this is that realistically, there's probably going to be a lot of letdowns in terms of sexually charged relationships, right? Sex does not equal love. And so for those of you that are stuck on somebody that you're deeply sexually attracted to, or you've had some kind of romantic fling with, I think things are definitely about to change. And there's probably a lot of drama with this because Venus is ruled by Mars, the planet of change and sometimes hubris and aggression, right? And action. So as Venus moves into this Sagittarius, right, which is here the 12th house, but regularly the 9th house, the 9th sign, right, I think there will actually be sort of a bittersweet liberation from drama, from relationship drama, from sexually charged drama and things like that. I think that's kind of what we're looking at. That's the vibe that I get, at least. And as that happens, right, there will be no more planets in water signs for a bit of time. Okay, so as that happens, and I believe it'll happen during this lunation, 2 weeks roughly after, within 2 weeks after this lunation, there may be an emotional release that occurs and that kind of a thing. There may be a letting go of ideals related to some kind of relationship or marriage situation that maybe were never that functional or realistic in the first place. So you should welcome that, even if it seems very difficult and bittersweet, because it's just, love is not a battlefield. I'm sorry, I cannot agree with Pat Benatar. Love is really not supposed to be a battlefield. Love is supposed to be selfless. Love is supposed to be actually impersonal on the highest levels. Love just is. Love is the force that holds everything together. It's the most powerful force in the universe. And what are we doing if we are getting jealous, getting upset, getting disturbed, getting controlled, and so on by the person or people that we're supposed to love and whatnot? So I think that when Venus moves into Sagittarius, there will be kind of a liberation of this stuff happening, and there will be a freedom. And Venus in Sagittarius is not necessarily wonderful for relationships in a very general way. I think it is better for sort of finding out who you are through self-love, or finding out who you are by being more adventurous, taking some risks and things like that, and spending some time kind of just living and loving more freely and that kind of a thing, but not necessarily in like a sexual way, because Jupiter and Jupiter sign, well, not Pisces because Venus is exalted there, but Sagittarius is very, very serious sign, very much seeking some kind of truth or meaning in things. And so we might see more people seeking the meaning of love and that kind of a thing, possibly seeking some kind of deeper, more grander love that's not just based upon sex, but that's based upon maybe a shared belief system or deeper spiritual principles, or a desire to participate in the social sphere or something like that. All very Jupiter Sagittarian sorts of themes. So yes, relationship will be, I think, a big thing once again. But then again, when is it not? I mean, it seems like it always is, But I think that, yeah, because the 12th parts of these planets are in Cancer, the seventh house, that kind of sets up a sub theme of relationships sort of being exposed perhaps for what they really are. On the other hand, though, 3 planets and the North Node move into Taurus by 12th part, right? We've got Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and the North Node. And North Node is very close to Saturn by 12th part, interestingly enough. So they all move into Taurus, which is the 5th house. What does this mean? Well, Taurus is naturally the 2nd house, right? So coupled with the 5th house, we kind of get a theme of financial risk taking, potentially, right? A lot of upset and upheaval to that house because we have 3 malefic planets and only 1 benefic planet there by 12th part. But it's a very interesting sub-theme. Again, it's bringing back this Saturn as Lord of the Second in the 1st with the lunation, right, with the eclipse. It's bringing that back, right? What is going on financially? What risks are people taking? Are they appropriate risks? Are they based upon, or are they afraid to take risks? Perhaps they are trying to have it all. Perhaps, and if you're trying to hold it all and hold on to it all, it's probably not really going to be good for your creativity and your joy and free-flowing kind of stuff happening. It's probably going to be kind of negative and stifling, right? So I don't know what else to say about that other than don't hold on too tightly to things and don't try to seek too much gratification in material things of the world, which is can be a very Taurus thing to do, And we do have this, again, emphasized Venus in the 11th, right, ruling Taurus and ruling all those planets that move into Taurus by 12th part. So there's kind of this theme of trying to do too much in the world, trying to be too much pleasure seeking, too much sensuality and so on. And again, Jupiter is in the 12th, linking the 5th and the 12th. That is a link for, just bacchanalia, so to speak. What's the word? Hedonism, just kind of unbridled hedonism. Jupiter's even in Venus's bound. So again, it just adds to this hedonistic kind of thing. But I do think when Venus moves into Jupiter's bound, they'll be exchanging bounds, which is cool, even though they're both in Jupiter's sign. And so there will be kind of a mutual give and take between the social sphere, gains in the social sphere, and gains in the private sphere, so to speak. I don't think I've said so to speak enough. Sorry about that. Mars has recently moved into Aries, and in this lunation squares Mercury pretty closely. So again, and they're both linked by this T-square, right, to the previous lunation we had, the full moon in Cancer. So arguments and conflicts, especially verbal, with friends and about anything to do with the past and so on. Possibly arguments over property and personal space, because this is the 4th house. Be aware of that. Be wary of that, or don't be wary of it, but just be aware of that. That could be a major theme. If there's resentment that you've been holding on to toward a roommate or toward, a parent or just a friend or whatever, that is something you need to constructively deal with. Okay. Otherwise it will just it will just easily kind of become an avalanche of resentment and devolve into argumentation and stuff like that during this period of time. So, yeah. Venus is also the 10th Lord. And again, it's so important because it is the sole planet here, right? It is the sole planet for this chart. Venus as the 10th Lord is, again, moving into the 12th. So this is going to be a period to let go of your achievements, right? There may be things that don't work out the way you wanted them to. It's time to let go of them. It's also maybe time for some of you to rethink your career path. It's an opportunity to rethink your career path. And this could also have to do with marriage and relationship. If you thought that your marriage was heading in one direction, but now it's suddenly kind of veering off to the left or the right or whatever, making a U-turn. This is, something to let go of as best you can, and it's kind of, I'm sorry, that's kind of vague, but it's kind of the best I can do at the moment. Um, Now, Saturn is causing. Sorry, I'm jumping around a lot. Saturn is causing a Raj Yoga to happen here, which is conducive to like great success, and in this case, maybe financial success and whatnot. But just sort of some kind of success involving. Well, sorry, I should say Saturn, Sun, and Moon are making the Raj Yoga, but kind of some kind of success as a result of maybe facing one's past, right? The things I talked about in the beginning of the analysis, really facing one's past and dealing with crumbling institutions. Again, we also have not only Capricorn emphasis, but the 10th house, Venus moving into the 12th emphasis, crumbling institutions, things you've been doing for a long time that you've relied on not being there any longer. Again, time to let those things go. But Mercury can interfere with that because Mercury rules the 6th house, so it can kind of cancel this auspiciousness. And I'm just going to point out again that is going to have a lot to do with not only communication, but with kind of resentment because of the Mars aspect, like dwelling too much upon a violation of one's personal space or some kind of bullshit like that. We all lie to ourselves and blame everything on other people. So we got to stop doing that always, but it's something I always like to bring up. And it's particularly relevant here. This could easily be also like a battle over religious, ideological things, belief systems, because 6th and 9th Lord are coming together under the rulership of Mercury. So just shut up. It's better to just shut up. Okay. Seriously, you're not as right as you think, and the other person is probably not as wrong as you think. So just get over yourself, especially with Mars in Jupiter, Aries, right? Jupiter bounds like ideological pricks at large here. So that's that. Another thing I wanted to mention too was that Mars being the Dharkaraka, which is the significator of the spouse, right? We have this kind of relationship ending theme, right? And they're both in fire. They're both going to be in fire signs soon because Venus is moving into Sag. So independence, right? A renewal of the inner flame. Marriage and spouse related stuff, right? Is probably this period is not conducive to that. So don't get married during this period. Don't move in together during this period. Some of you who watch this and who this interpretation becomes relevant to, your spouse or partner or the person you're interested in is probably wanting to be alone and is in a place of deep independence, but also very ambitious. Okay, so don't be surprised if this is not the time where they want to like settle down with you and just like be with you and blah, blah, blah. They're striking out on their own. They're striking out into new, richer territory, so to speak. Okay, their 5th house from Mars, the 5th house from Mars is Leo, and the Sun is in the 10th house for Mars, where Mars is exalted, right? So they're probably questioning their life path in a big way, right? So let them have the space to do that. They're trying to figure out what they really want in life. They're really trying to figure it out, okay? And for the rest of us, we're trying to figure out a lot of things related as well to where we fit in society and how we relate to money and what we can do with money and so on, and how we spend money, because Jupiter's in the 12th. Jupiter is the natural significator of money. Mercury and Mars here is, again, impulsive, very impulsive, and as far as managing money and finances, it's a risk-taking aspect, and luckily there is reception, right? Mars receives Mercury, so there's some risk-taking, there's some dancing with the devil here with regard to management of affairs and, of course, thinking as well, thinking outside the box. And it's good to just kind of let that happen and roll with it, but there may be negatively a tendency to be like very, very impulsive. But notice that because of the overall positive influence here with the reception, the fact that Jupiter makes a whole sign aspect to Mars. Likely your risks aren't going to destroy you. So I would recommend taking risks. You know, it's a good time to take risks. It really is. There's 3 planets in domicile. Mercury's in its own bounds. So we have a situation in which, you know, things can generally be not necessarily stable, but just sort of things can happen in a way that can easily lead to empowerment and success and things like that, just generically speaking. And I think that's sort of all I have to say for now. Venus is, or sorry, the last thing I'll say is Venus is by 12th part in Libra, giving it some, you know, some oomph, right? A little more power as Venus. So, you know, maybe that suggests that, in fact, there is a way to save a dying relationship or a dying partnership. But it's going to take some effort, and it's going to require some responsible actions in that direction. So if that is your situation with this configuration, I would recommend just take responsibility for everything. Don't feel like, well, they're responsible for this, I'm responsible for this. Just say, okay, I'm sorry, I apologize. Don't get into this, they did this, I did that. Don't do it. Just, I apologize, right? And see what happens. You'll be amazed, honestly. You will be amazed, I guarantee. Okay, guys, so that does it for this video. Please hit like, subscribe, share this video with all your friends. Check me out on Facebook, and of course, visit my website in the description below for individualized readings and more. And happy eclipsing. Happy 2019. All right, until next time. Oh, yeah. Also, don't forget to check out my videos on the tarot readings for all 12 signs, Sun, Moon, and Ascendant for January. You can find that on my YouTube page. All right, peace out, folks.